On the night of Qingming Festival, my roommate gave me a banknote and said she was treating me to a late-night snack. I didn't spend the money, and the next second, she was hit by a car and died. After reporting it to the police, I returned to the dorm and found that the other roommates had also received banknotes from the deceased roommate. It turns out this money is called borrowed life money. Whoever receives it will have their lifespan taken away, but I was the one who received the money. So why did my roommate die? At 1001 hashtag, on the night of Qingming Festival, I went out with my roommate Xiaotao to buy some late-night snacks. She, who is usually very stingy, suddenly offered to treat me to a late-night snack and even gave me a banknote to pay with. Since the vendor didn't have any change, I ended up paying with my phone instead, seeing me take the money back. Xiaotao's face showed an expression of fear and despair. How come, you brought the money back again? The boss said he didn't have cash and couldn't make change, but it's fine, this meal is on me. I grinned and tried to return the money to Xiaotao. Little did I expect that she would slap away the 100 yuan I returned to her, suddenly stand up as if gone mad, and run across the street. No, don't come near me, I don't want this money anymore, stop bothering me, she cried and shouted, waving her arms as if shooing away mosquitoes. At that very moment, a car suddenly accelerated and ran over her, dragging her under its wheels. Creak, bang, squeak, the wheels, gripping flesh and blood, left a skid mark over 10 meters long. The asphalt road steamed with the acrid stench of burnt rubber and the metallic smell of blood. Watching Xiaotao, whose hair got caught in the wheels and crushed her head, I was stunned. The people around were terrified, frantically calling the police and an ambulance. The driver at fault was huddled in the driver's seat, trembling with fear, and said with a terrified expression, but the car was driving just fine. How could I suddenly lose my sight, just like that? How did I end up crashing? At 1001 hashtag, afterward, the traffic police took him away. The initial conclusion was either excessive fatigue or low blood sugar. I couldn't return the money to Xiaotao anymore, so I just tucked it into my phone case, planning to return it when her parents came up from the countryside, but unexpectedly, on the way to the crematorium, another roommate, Xiaolin, suddenly asked me, did Xiaotao ever give you any money? No, her family is not well off, why would she give me money voluntarily? I originally wanted to tell the truth, but as the words reached my lips, as if possessed, I actually shook my head and denied it, because Xiaolin is stingy and had argued with Xiaotao many times over sharing water and electricity bills when renting together. I thought that since we still have to live together in the future, there's no need to affect my relationship with my roommate over a deceased friend, so I flatly denied it. After all, there are still 6 months left on the lease, then your relationship must be really good. She didn't use the borrowed life money to harm you. I didn't expect my denial would make Xiaolin hold an even stronger prejudice against me, her face full of a cold sneer, her eyes filled with mockery. A few days ago, she suddenly came to me and said she wanted to treat me to a meal. I thought, since our relationship is so bad and she's so stingy, there must be something fishy, so I didn't agree. Then she turned to Xiaoxia, wanting to use money to buy the takeout her boyfriend Lin Feng had ordered for her. Seeing us talking about this, Xiaoxia left her boyfriend who was playing games with her and angrily chimed in. We saw she was using cash, and on it was written ominous words like borrow your life to buy my life. So we didn't agree. Later, Xiaolin told me that this is the borrowed life money from the local suburbs. Superstitious elderly people write words to eliminate illness and misfortune on the banknotes and throw them on the roadside. As long as someone picks it up, it's equivalent to agreeing to make a deal with the person who threw the money, exchanging their own health or luck for that note. Then, what happens if someone accidentally takes the borrowed life money? My heart sank, and I quickly asked. Xiaolin stared at me thoughtfully, then furrowed his brow tightly. Light health damage, plagued by misfortune, and in severe cases, the person who picks up the money might die an unnatural death, taking on someone else's lifespan. Dang Lin, think carefully again. Did Xiaotao really give you any money? At 1001 hashtag, I was just about to reply to her when Lin Feng drove the car to the crematorium, and the beeping horn sound diverted our attention. I saw a middle-aged couple, who looked to be in their 40s or 50s, standing by the roadside, waving at us with worried expressions on their faces. I remembered them. They were Xiaotao's parents. They often brought her fruits and vegetables from the countryside, and then, by complaining about their poverty, they would take away nearly 2/3 of her monthly salary to support her younger brother. Earlier this month, I heard that her brother had gone swimming in the reservoir with his classmates and had an accident after being dragged underwater by a water monkey. At the time, I was quite happy for her, thinking that with Yaozu gone, her hardships were finally over and she wouldn't have to be financially drained by her family anymore. Little did she expect that before she could even begin to enjoy life, she would bid farewell to this world so early. We thought that even though we lost our son, We at least had our daughter to rely on, now our daughter is gone too. It's truly over, Xiao Tao's mother cried sorrowfully, sitting on the ground and kicking her legs, refusing to buy a funeral urn from the mortuary. We can't count on raising children for old age anymore, so we don't want the urn either. Just put our daughter's ashes in this plastic bag, and we'll take her back to our hometown to bury her in the fields ourselves. Although according to local customs, those who die an unnatural death cannot be buried in the ancestral graves immediately, and must first be buried in their own family's land for a few years to dispel the bad luck before being moved to the ancestral burial ground to receive offerings in the ancestral hall. But this was the first time the mortuary staff had encountered such a stingy person who wouldn't even spend 100 yuan on an urn and insisted on using a plastic bag, although the middle-aged couple before them cried pitifully. Besides cremation services, the sale of urns is also a revenue source for the crematorium. This won't do. If you don't buy the urn, none of you can leave. It's the rule. Seeing that the conflict was about to escalate, I quickly stepped forward. I'll cover the cost of the urn, remembering that I still had the 100 yuan Xiao Tao gave me. I took the opportunity to pay the funeral home staff for Xiao Tao's urn. With the payment settled and the goods received, it was as if I had indirectly returned the money. The wool comes from the sheep's back. I used the money Xiao Tao gave me to buy her an urn. Doesn't that count as returning the money? Thinking this way, my originally anxious heart gradually calmed down. At 1001 hashtag. Returning to Xiao Tao's parents' place, Xiao Lin and I washed our hands with pomelo leaves together. Xiao Tao's mother wiped her tears and, with a smile, handed up protective charms made of rice, tea leaves, and 5-cent coins tied in red bags to each of us in the rental house, but didn't give any to their relatives. Seeing the red bag specifically prepared for us, with money inside, I, Xiao Lin, Xiao Xia, and Lin Feng immediately had unpleasant expressions on our faces. Could it be that this also contains money for borrowing longevity? Considering that Xiao Tao's family had lost 2 members in a row, and the elderly were left alone and helpless, it's possible they might target us outsiders to borrow luck and ward off evil. I swallowed hard and took a step back, not reaching for the bag that was offered to me. Seeing me step back, Kobayashi and the others followed suit and didn't touch the so-called protective talisman given by Momo's mother. Auntie, we're Momo's friends, and we've always had a good relationship. There's no need for the protective talisman. I believe Momo will watch over us from the afterlife, Kobayashi said with an awkward smile, shoving his hands into his pockets, his eyes filled with resistance. Momo's mother's incessant tears suddenly stopped. You are outsiders, and according to our local customs, you must take a protective talisman home to ensure safety, she said with a bitter smile, the wrinkles on her face blooming like a chrysanthemum. Xiao Tao. Something very bad happened to Xiao Tao. Did she give you any money? Seeing her bring up the matter of money, Xiao Lin immediately grew furious. She spat toward the pile of red bags, loudly exposing her scheme as she did so. Auntie, are you talking about borrowed life money? I'm also a local. Are you using these messy, evil tricks to borrow luck from our family to transfer your misfortune onto us? After saying that, she knocked the pile of protective talismans out of Xiao Tao's mother's hands and pulled us to leave. As long as we don't take the money, the life-borrowing transaction can't be completed. Xiao Tao's mother shouted furiously behind us. You don't even know you need a coffin. You're about to die and still don't realize it. If you weren't my daughter's friends, I wouldn't even bother with you. You're doomed, you old cunning hag, eating tofu. Just trying to scam people. Before everyone entered the house, Xiao Lin found a ball of newspaper and lit it, making all of us step over the fire before we could go inside. Their family has lost 2 children in a row. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they're doomed to die without descendants. They must have gotten into some serious trouble and are planning to shift the blame onto us. As soon as she said this, Xiao Xia, who has always been outspoken, immediately looked as if she had just had a sudden realization. Didn't Xiao Tao say her younger brother drowned in the reservoir while swimming illegally, dragged under by a water ghost seeking a replacement? It's possible her brother died with a grievance, turned into a vengeful spirit, and is now haunting their family, wanting them to stay together as a loving family in death. That's why they're trying to borrow our lives, me, Deng Lin, and you, Xiao Lin. That makes exactly 3 of us. Enough to replace the 3 lives in their family. It's not entirely impossible. Xiao Lin's expression was extremely grave as he fearfully closed the door. Lin Feng wanted to leave, but Xiao Xia stubbornly refused to let him go, insisting on borrowing his yang energy to protect the house. At 1001 hashtag, while the 2 were playfully fighting, Xiao Lin, who had already returned to the room, suddenly screamed, "Ah, the longevity money, this money. Who put this money on my bed?" We rushed into her room and saw a pink 100 yuan bill lying on her bed. On the pink paper, the words "borrow your life to buy my life" were clearly written. How could this be? Xiaolin slumped to the ground. I was definitely the last one to leave, and there was absolutely nothing like this on my bed before I left. I locked all the doors and windows, so no one else could have come in. Could it be from Xiao Tao? Xiaoxia screamed and threw herself into Lin Feng's arms. Don't say such things, she's already dead. Otherwise... How could the borrowed life money appear out of nowhere in my room? Xiaolin was becoming somewhat hysterical. I had a conflict with Shadow. She must have hated me deeply, even in death. She wants to use me as a scapegoat to ward off disaster for her family. We stared at each other wide-eyed, momentarily at a loss for words. At that moment, I suddenly thought of my own room, before her death. Shadow had also given me the borrowed life money, but she died an untimely death before me. If I were in her shoes, having come so close to successfully passing on the money only to die suddenly, I would surely be filled with resentment. If I were Xiao Tao, if I were a ghost, even as a ghost I wouldn't let myself off. Thinking of this, I forced myself to move my feet and trudge toward my own room, pushing the door open. Sure enough, there was a longevity borrowing note on my bed too. Looking at those striking blue characters that read "Borrow your life to buy my life," I felt a chill crawl up my spine and spread all over my body. There's also a longevity borrowing coin on my bed. I was trembling all over, hearing me say that. Lin Feng and Xiaoxia seemed to realize something too, and they hurried back to Xiaoxia's room to check. And in Xiaoxia's room, on her bed, there was also a longevity borrowing coin lying quietly. Xiaoxia's face instantly turned deathly pale. That bill. The one Xiao Tao wanted to use to buy the takeout you ordered for me. I didn't see it wrong. Could it be? Has Xiao Tao come back? She clung tightly to Lin Feng's arm, trembling all over. Seeing the three of us so nervous, Lin Feng actually burst out laughing. Isn't it just a longevity borrowing note? What's there to be afraid of with such feudal superstitions? He snatched the longevity borrowing note from the bed, cut it a few times with scissors, felt it wasn't enough, then took out a lighter and burned it completely, as long as it can be burned away. There's nothing to fear. The smell of burning paper money filled the room, and the warm, smoky scent temporarily dispelled our fear. Looking at Lin Feng, who was perfectly fine before us, we calmed down and exchanged a glance, feeling ashamed of our earlier panicked foolishness. Ahem, maybe I remembered it wrong. Perhaps Xiao Tao secretly placed it on our bed earlier, and we only noticed it by accident today. Xiaolin cleared her throat, picked up the borrowed life money from her own bed, and threw it into the trash bin. I then turned and went back to my room. Although I was still a bit scared, I tucked the borrowed life money into my phone case just as I had done before. At 1001 hashtag, ding dong, an unknown number sent me a text message. Lin Dang, I am Li Tao's mother. Someone used borrowed life money to buy her life. Considering that you bought the urn for Xiao Tao, I helped you retrieve the borrowed life money that was given to the funeral home. It's placed under the doormat where you usually leave the keys. Seeing this message, I couldn't hold back my emotions. That's right, there's a key under the doormat. Xiao Tao's mother must have come before we returned. The money for borrowing life on our bed might have been placed by her, Auntie. This money for borrowing life was originally given to me by Xiao Tao. I originally intended to give it directly to you and Uncle, but since we needed to buy an urn, I used it as an indirect way to repay the debt. You can't assume that I'm the one who caused Xiao Tao's death just because I used the money for borrowing life to buy the urn. In fact, it was Xiao Tao who took the money and went around asking us, trying to use our hands to spend it. Auntie, you can't play the victim while being the thief, actually. Xiao Tao deliberately took the money to harm us outsiders for your and Uncle's sake, right? The 3 notes of borrowing life money placed in our room. You also took the key from under the shoe mat, secretly opened the door, and came in to play tricks, right? We won't put the key back anymore. Auntie, please stop harassing us. I typed furiously, my heart filled with anger. I simply can't understand it. Xiao Tao herself was a victim of a family that favors boys over girls. Yet she still aids and abets her vampire-like parents. Not only does she spend money and effort on them, but she even resorts to shady practices to drag us outsiders into it. Whether it's effective or not is beside the point, but the mother and daughter's antics have genuinely frightened us. Whatever her and her mother's intentions may be, the person is already gone, and I want nothing more to do with anything related to Xiao Tao's family. As for the longevity borrowing money outside the door, I had already used it up. Whether it's there or not is no longer my concern. At 1001 hashtag, I told Xiaolin, Xiaoxia, and Lin Feng about Xiao Tao's mother's visit. The 3 of them suddenly had an epiphany. Xiaolin angrily cursed Xiao Tao's entire family. Now that the truth has come to light, we all breathed a sigh of relief and decided to gather in the dining room to eat our takeout. Lin Feng, who finished eating first, was in the kitchen playing on his phone while boiling water, from where I was sitting. I had a clear diagonal view through the sliding glass door of the kitchen, so I could see exactly what he was doing. Suddenly, a slender ghostly figure at the edge of my vision swept past my ear with a gentle breeze. My heart skipped a beat, and all the hairs on my body stood on end. At the same time, Lin Feng suddenly turned around and looked at me in terror. Did someone just come in? Xiao Lin and Xiao Xia were almost choked by the sight of us too. Xiao Xia walked behind me and tried to push the kitchen door open, but the door didn't budge at all. Lin Feng, open the door, she said while pushing with all her might. Lin Feng put down his phone and stepped forward to push the door. The door remained unmoving, as if it were locked. Lin Feng in the kitchen grew frantic, pounding on the sliding door with such force that the frame rattled loudly. With a click, the door was completely locked. Damn it. The anxious Lin Feng couldn't help but curse. Completely unaware that the water in the kettle on the stove had already boiled, Xiao Lin quickly called the landlord and the property management, asking them to bring tools to pry the door open. I followed Xiao Xia in knocking on the door and reminded Lin Feng, the boiling water has overflowed and extinguished the flame, turn off the gas quickly. Okay, Lin Feng hurriedly turned around, but suddenly his movements came to a halt. I followed his gaze and caught sight of a tall, slender shadow reaching up to the ceiling on the stainless steel kettle, and I froze too. Lin Feng was so frightened by the sight that he took a big step back, bumping into the wall on the other side of the kitchen. Losing his balance, he fell to the ground. As he fell, he instinctively grabbed onto the kitchen cabinet, but his hands kept flailing in vain. Grabbing wildly like that, with a sweep of his arm, he knocked over the rack filled with knives. The knives fell from above, thud, 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 all plunging into Lin Feng's thighs as he sat on the ground. Ah, ah, ah. He screamed repeatedly the moment the sharp blades pierced him. Blood gushed from his thighs, flowing incessantly from the wounds like a faucet that had been turned on. I was so frightened by the tragic scene that I fell to the ground, trembling all over. Xiao Xia and Xiao Lin were stunned for a moment, then pushed me aside and began pounding on the sliding door even harder, trying to get inside and pull Lin Feng out. At 1001 hashtag, suddenly, I felt something spreading through the air, a familiar scent. When my gaze fell on the stove that had been extinguished by boiling water, I shuddered and started pounding on the sliding door as well. Turn off the gas quickly, there's a gas leak. If there's an open flame, it will explode. I don't know if it's an illusion, but after I shouted, the smell of gas in the air seemed even stronger. Lin Feng, trapped in the kitchen, gritted his teeth, struggled to grab the edge of the cabinet, and dragged himself toward the gas tank. Just as his hand reached the gas valve and he began to turn it, with a crackle, the power in the house suddenly went out. The air conditioner, TV, Wi-Fi, and refrigerator in the room stopped working one after another, but then, the power came back on, the lights flickered twice, and at the same time, the refrigerator in the kitchen started up again. At that very moment of startup, the friction of the parts in the kitchen, where the gas concentration was high enough, suddenly sparked an explosion. A fireball instantly erupted onto Lin Feng, burning his clothes from head to toe in an instant. Xiao Xia let out a scream, nearly collapsing to the ground. Xiao Lin and I quickly supported her from both sides. The three of us could do nothing but watch as Lin Feng writhed in the flames. Just as the fire was about to spread to the kitchen, the property management arrived. They quickly broke open the sliding door and used a fire extinguisher to put out the flames on Lin Feng, who was convulsing on the ground. Lin Feng, whose skin had been burned to a soy sauce color, stopped breathing before the ambulance arrived. Did Lin Feng burn the borrowed longevity money, and that's why he was burned to death? After finishing the statement, Xiao Lin and I, with worried faces, comforted Xiao Xia, who was crying non-stop. Xiao Lin let out a long sigh and advised her with a hint of envy, but since he took the blame for you, you won't have to die, woo-woo. But Lin Feng is my boyfriend, I can't bear to lose him. Seeing how heartbroken Xiao Xia was, neither of us knew how to comfort her anymore. Oh no. My borrowed longevity money is still in the trash bin in the room. Xiao Lin suddenly stood up in a panic, pulling us to accompany her back to the rental apartment to find the money. I just asked my grandma, and she told us to either spend the money or donate it as soon as possible, or return it to its original owner and spit to signify the rejection of the transaction. Going to Xiao Tao's hometown to return it to her parents is unrealistic. But why don't we first spend the money we have on hand? The thought of returning to the scene where her boyfriend died tragically made Xiao Xia refuse to go back no matter what. I won't go back. I'll order some good food at the barbecue stall and wait for you to bring the money back to pay the bill. Although Ah Feng has already taken the fall for me, I'm scared of Xiao Tao and Ah Feng. I'll wait for you in a crowded place. She pulled up a small stool and sat in front of the barbecue tricycle to place her order. Not daring to look at me or Xiaolin in the face, seeing her pitiful look, we had no choice but to let her be. At 1001 hashtag, as Xiaolin and I were walking back, she suddenly thought of something and asked me with confusion, "By the way, Dang Lin, what about your borrowed longevity money? If it's lost, there's no way to resolve it. Why aren't you even nervous?" I smiled and said, "When I went to the police station to give my statement, I was worried the scene might be sealed off. But I didn't dare to carry the borrowed longevity money with me, so I hid it under the doormat at the entrance, making it easy to come back and handle it any time. So that's how it is." Xiaolin chuckled a few times. "You're clever and loyal, keeping a backup plan and still willing to come back with me to get the money." We pretended to be relaxed, chatting and laughing all the way, and soon arrived at the rental apartment. Thanks to the timely arrival of the property management and the fire department, the fire was brought under control, and the leaking gas cylinder was removed. Only the kitchen in the rental apartment was scorched black by the fire, while the rest of the place remained undamaged. Even so, we were so frightened that we didn't even dare to take off our shoes and walked straight in through the door. "I'm ready, hurry up." I took a few steps back, exited the room backward, crouched down, and pulled out the borrowed life money that Xiao Tao's mother had placed under the shoe cushion. Xiaolin quickly ran back to her room, grabbed the trash bin, and hurried back. She dumped the tissues, powdered drink packets, and papers from the trash bin onto the floor, begging me to help her search through them. I flipped through a few times and accidentally caught sight of our 3 insurance policies among the papers dumped from the trash bin. A red 100 yuan bill fell out from the insurance policy. Found it. Xiaolin excitedly picked up the borrowed life money and was about to leave. Seeing me looking through the insurance policy, she frowned and urged me with a conflicted expression, "Isn't this the 9 yuan accident insurance I helped everyone buy last month?" Hearing her say that, I suddenly remembered, at that time, it was mainly for fun. Since we were all girls who weren't valued much at home and couldn't go back to sweep the tombs during Qingming festival, we felt quite indignant. Xiaolin spent her own money to buy this accident insurance for us, which was on promotion at the time. We wrote each other's names as beneficiaries. When Xiao Tao wrote her own name, she laughed so hard that tears came out, saying she finally had something that her family couldn't take advantage of. But who would have thought that before the Qingming holiday was even over, 2 out of the 5 of us had died. "A life is compensated with 100,000 yuan, she sighed, "but I'd rather everyone was still alive and well." As she spoke, her voice grew softer and softer, and suddenly she became angry. "Forget about the insurance policy. The urgent matter now is to quickly find a place to spend the borrowed life money, or else we'll all die. And all 4 of us will end up benefiting Xiaoxia with the compensation money." Seeing Xiaolin's furious and flustered expression, I quickly comforted her. "We'll all be fine. Let's hurry and spend the borrowed life money. We should also take the insurance policy with us. If any of us passes away, the survivors can still enjoy the happiness brought by this friendship." The words I use to persuade others often carry a sense of finding joy in hardship. Like a trapped beast making the best of a desperate situation, but girls help girls. Life is already tough, and working-class girls at the bottom should unite and support each other even more. Xiaolin took it to heart and quickly calmed down. "You're right, let's hurry and go." Although her words sounded light-hearted, her footsteps were running swiftly. Neither of us dared to look back at that house again. At 1001 hashtag. After leaving in a hurry, we returned to the barbecue stall where Xiaoxia was waiting. She was anxiously looking around, and when she saw us return, the tension on her face visibly eased a lot. That night, for the first time in our lives, we splurged extravagantly, ordering plenty of grilled squid, perilla beef, honey-glazed ribs, chicken feet, grilled pork belly, chicken wings, oysters, lamb skewers, and grilled fish, all meat, without a single vegetable dish. Although the price exceeded the cost of 2 borrowed life coins, the thought that spending them might not guarantee survival crossed my mind. This barbecue suddenly felt like a lavish last meal before our execution. The sun is up, and the sanitation workers have already started sweeping the streets. Does that mean nothing will happen tonight? Xiaoxia rubbed her sleepy eyes. She had dozed off several times at the small square table, clearly exhausted. "I'm so tired, let's go home." She stood up unsteadily, accidentally knocking over the unfinished lemonade, which soaked the borrowed life coins Xiaolin had placed underneath. "Oh dear, you're so careless." Xiaolin wrinkled her nose in disgust, stood up, and walked to the roadside to call her mother and let her know she was safe. Xiaoxia quickly put on a cheeky grin, pulled out the wet banknotes and shook them dry, then rushed ahead of me to pay the bill. "Don't be mad. I'm the safest one right now. Let me take it for you." She ran away as lightly as a white butterfly, her long black hair flying in the morning breeze. "Boss, table 5 is ready to pay." Holding the money, she maneuvered around a small square table where some customers were still lingering. A drunk man couldn't resist reaching out to touch her long hair, startling her into quickly sidestepping to avoid him. The ground at the late-night snack stall was greasy. As she dodged the man's groping hand, she lost her balance, slipped, and fell flat on her back. Her body slammed heavily against the front of the stall owner's electric tricycle. The pot of snail noodle soup from the insulated container on the vehicle tipped over, splashing all over her face. The scalding hot soup reddened her face. She let out a sharp cry, arching her body like a red shrimp, repeatedly clawing at her throat, vomiting large mouthfuls of the oily red soup, and coughing incessantly. Everyone was stunned by the sudden turn of events. I was no exception. Xiaolin, who was the first to react, hung up the phone, turned and ran toward Xiaoxia, helping her up and clearing the obstructions from her throat. At that moment, Xiaoxia's face was covered in scalding hot chili soup, and her eyes were in so much pain that she couldn't open them. I finally snapped out of it, grabbed the leftover lemon water from the table, and quickly rinsed her face, which was red and scalded. Her face was swollen terribly, her mouth was wide open, and she was breathing rapidly, as if someone was choking her. At 1001 hashtag, someone called an ambulance. But in just over 10 minutes, her breathing gradually weakened. It's hopeless. The medical staff who arrived late checked her pulse and looked at her throat. Acute epiglottitis. The spicy chili oil soup scalded and irritated her epiglottis above the trachea, causing swelling and narrowing at the base of the tongue root in the throat passage. This affected her breathing, leading to airway obstruction, preventing oxygen from reaching the lungs and carbon dioxide from being expelled, resulting in suffocation. Upon hearing this, I felt my legs go weak. Just over 10 minutes ago, Xiaoxia had been laughing and talking with us, and now she had died in such an absurd and bizarre way right before our eyes. Xiaolin left Xiaoxia's family's contact information with the medical staff and then pulled me along as we fled in a panic. Why did Xiaoxia still die when Lin Feng had already given his life for her? She cried as she walked. We clearly followed my grandma's instructions and spent the borrowed life money. Does the 3 borrowed life money mean 3 lives are involved? Among the 4 of us, Lin Feng, Xiaoxia, me, and Xiaolin, 3 must die. Xiaolin was terrified, so I didn't dare say this out loud and instead tried to comfort her. But at least we've spent all the money. I nervously pinched the phone case containing the last borrowed longevity money. Once this is over, we can go to the insurance company to claim the 300,000 compensation, right, after we get the money. We'll take some to Xiaoxia and Lin Feng's families. Hearing me mention the compensation, Xiaolin's eyes lit up at first, then she lowered her eyelids, lost in thought. Let's not talk about the money for now, she said thoughtfully, staring into my eyes. I always feel like this isn't over yet. Are you really sure we've spent all the money? Did Xiaotao ever give you any money, or secretly slip you some? Think carefully. Or something bad might really happen. After hesitating for a moment, I took out that 100 yuan bill. The moment he saw the money, Kobayashi's eyes lit up and then dimmed, quickly turning to anger. You really did take the money Peach gave you, she said, stepping back to put distance between us. You're done for. Give me the insurance policies. Dead people don't need to spend money. She suddenly reached out, snatched my bag, and took the stack of insurance policies. You lied to me. Go fend for yourself. You can't do this. I reached up to snatch it back, but Xiaolin just grabbed the policy and ran. I was so angry I stomped my feet, but there was nothing I could do. After all, she runs faster than I do. Xiaotao's policy beneficiary is me, my beneficiary is Xiaolin, Xiaolin's beneficiary is me, and Xiaoxia and Linfeng's beneficiaries are each other. I really don't understand why Xiaolin would take all the policies. If she really wanted one, she could have just taken mine. But having finally reached the age of self-reliance, and not yet having had the chance to truly see the world, I won't surrender to fate so easily. I'm not dead yet, anything is possible. Xiaolin said the way to resolve the borrowed life money is to spend it or return it. Maybe I should just throw the money into the temple's donation box. I forced myself to calm down and sought the power of the righteous gods to suppress the unorthodox folk practices. Although I was also filled with resentment, I would rather swallow my anger than be entangled by the evil art of borrowing life to repay a debt. At 1001 hashtag, I walked to the nearest Jingda temple using navigation, bought incense to pay my respects, and then threw the borrowed life money into the donation box. The moment I threw the money into the box, my hand felt as if it had been struck by something, and the borrowed life money fluttered to the ground. If I put the money into the donation box, it would be buried under the continuous stream of money from subsequent worshippers, just like a person being buried alive. I was suddenly taken aback, not understanding why such a thought had abruptly crossed my mind. Xiaotao dropped the borrowed life money, so she was hit and killed by a car. Lin Feng burned the money with fire, so he died in a fire. Xiaoxia accidentally spilled lemon water and soaked the borrowed life money, so she was scalded by the hot and spicy snail noodle soup. which caused her throat to swell and led to suffocation. I was suddenly struck by a realization: if someone who took the borrowed life money accidentally dropped it, burned it, or soaked it while spending it, the person spending the money would suffer the same punishment as the borrowed life money. But wait, that doesn't make sense. Why is it that Xiao Tao's money ended up with me, and she died? In theory, her borrowed life money should have been considered a successful transaction and no longer effective on people, so why, when Xiaoxia died, didn't Xiaolin immediately retrieve the money? Instead, he seemed to accept that those two notes had already completed the transaction and were no longer effective on people. Xiaolin was so certain that this unused longevity loan note in my hand, which had caused Xiao Tao's death, was valid. What gave her such confidence? Unless this note wasn't the one Xiao Tao gave me at all, but a brand new one that hadn't yet been successfully traded, and that unfamiliar phone number was simply a pretext she used, pretending to be Xiao Tao's mother, to trick me into taking the money. Everything was decided by Xiaolin. Could it be that she was the mastermind all along? At 1001 hashtag, my mind was in chaos. Just as I lowered my head to sort out my thoughts, someone behind me waiting in line to deposit money pushed me. Young man, if you can't bear to part with the money, then leave quickly. Don't hog the toilet if you're not going to shit. I was suddenly startled and quickly crouched down to pick up the borrowed life money, then hurried away. The person who pushed me glanced at the money in my hand and said, "Borrowed life money, you need to return this to the person who gave it to you in order to resolve it, otherwise, just keep it safe and let it borrow a little of your life each day. So you die a bit slower. What happens if I spend the money?" I quickly turned back and asked. That person replied to me, "Then you'll die right away." After throwing in the money, he walked off without looking back. Judging by the accent, also a local. No mistake, Xiao Tao is a local, Xiaolin is also a local. They all knew that spending the money immediately would hasten the death of the person who took it. Xiaolin wanted to kill me to get the insurance payout, but what about Xiao Tao? Her brother died in an accident, and it's very likely that his sister, Zhao Di, or Xiao Tao, who had long resented their parents' favoritism, rebelled. But why would she take the money and drag me into it, unless Yi and Xiaolin had planned it from the start, using the borrowed life money to harm me for financial gain, especially since Xiaoxia's beneficiary was the deceased Lin Feng? I can understand why Xiaolin did that, but how could my good friend Xiao Tao betray me? I gritted my teeth and decided to find Xiaolin to return the money. I remember Xiaolin doesn't have a laptop and often uses a tablet for work. To make internet access more convenient, she linked her tablet to her Apple phone using the same ID for location tracking, and Apple devices come with a built-in Find My feature that allows you to check the device's location. In other words, if I can get Xiaolin's tablet, I can locate her current position. Then we need to hurry. I hope she hasn't gone back to take all her things yet. At 1001 hashtag, I rushed back to the rental apartment, and sure enough, she hadn't dared to return to collect her personal belongings out of guilt, since she often borrowed my desktop computer to work on proposals and create PowerPoint presentations. I would use her tablet to watch short videos, so I knew her tablet's password. After entering 6 sevens on the login screen, I quickly found her based on the location shown on the tablet. She was actually eating wontons at the Wanda Plaza a kilometer away. She probably intended to come back for her luggage and make a run for it, but was worried I might be at home. I grabbed her tablet and hurried toward her location. It was as if she knew where I was. The location kept changing as I got closer. Just as the two of us were getting closer, her location actually stopped changing. I immediately breathed a sigh of relief and sprinted toward the spot where she had stopped. But when I reached her location, I found it completely empty. Where is she? I anxiously searched the surrounding shops, but there was no one. I called her, but her phone was turned off. She probably sensed my arrival and cut off the location sharing. I suddenly remembered the unfamiliar number she used to impersonate Xiaotao's mother and send me a text. Just as I was about to call it, I inexplicably hung up. I had just used the tablet to locate her position, but I probably made it too obvious by rushing over, and she noticed. The more she avoids me, the more certain I am that she is the mastermind behind the borrowed life money. This number tricked me into picking up the borrowed life money under the doormat. The owner of this number isn't Xiaolin, but at the very least, it's someone who knows Xiaolin. It doesn't matter if Xiaolin's phone is off, as long as that number isn't turned off. I'll know where she is. I pretended to be dejected, walking into the subway station with an air of someone who has given up and is leaving their fate to the heavens. After getting off the station, I immediately opened my phone, found the control center, held down the Wi-Fi icon to access AirDrop, selected Contacts Only, then opened Find My, started sharing my location, and tapped the plus sign to add that unfamiliar number. I chose to send via phone and selected Share Indefinitely. The location of the number's owner instantly appeared on my phone. The distance between us was only 100 meters. Xiaolin was indeed nearby. I decisively bought a sun-protective jacket, hat, and mask from someone entering or exiting the subway station. After putting them on, I came out from another subway entrance and hurried toward the location. I blended in with a group of college students and slowly approached the restaurant where the location was. No one was on the first floor. I went up to the second floor and finally found her in a booth by the window overlooking the street, hidden behind a row of potted plants. I ran over and threw the money onto her desk. Take it back. I don't agree to lend my lifespan. Our deal is cancelled. As I spoke, I spat at Kobayashi. Kobayashi panicked, quickly stood up, and wiped the spit I had spat on her face. Then, she calmly sat down again. You found out. She sneered, crumpling the life-borrowing money in her hand. What a pity. But it doesn't matter. If the life-borrowing money can't kill you, I can always find someone else to kill for money. You really will stop at nothing for money. I clenched my fists. You deliberately tricked us into buying insurance, and now you're using these supernatural methods to harm people. But I don't understand. My policy beneficiary is you, so killing me makes some sense. But why are you also trying to kill Xiao Tao? Xiaolin sneered, sat back down, and took a sip of her drink. I forced her into it. Her mother wanted her to marry the old bachelor in the village to get the bride price for her brother to buy a house, so I gave her the borrowed life money, told her to give it to her brother so he could die. The condition was that she had to help me pass the borrowed life money to you, using your life to bring me wealth in exchange for her freedom. At 1001 hashtag, the truth left me speechless. My voice failed me. I couldn't utter a single word. Xiaolin downed the drink in her hand in one go and stood up to leave. You're a smart person. That insurance policy is only valid for the week around the Qingming festival holiday, and today is the last day. Just because I can't kill you now doesn't mean I won't trip you up later and use the life-borrowing money to harm you again, as long as you don't spill the beans, interfere with my insurance sales, or disrupt my plans to get rich using the life-borrowing money. We can go our separate ways and call it even. How about it? No, I glared at her with hatred, full of resentment. Not only did you harm me for 100,000 yuan, but you also indirectly caused Xiaoxia and Lin Feng's deaths. I won't let you off so easily. What can you do about it? She stared back at me with a cold laugh, taking out the money I had returned to her to pay the bill at the counter. Besides raging helplessly, you can't do anything. I shook my head, looked up at the precariously hanging crystal chandelier overhead, and suddenly moved 10 steps away from her. You took my borrowed life money, now it's your turn to die. What? She stared at the money the cashier had put in the drawer. Her expression suddenly changed. Before she could rush over to question, the chandelier above her head suddenly brushed past her arm and crashed to the ground. The light fixture shattered into pieces, and glass shards flew everywhere. Screams erupted throughout the restaurant. Xiaolin seized the opportunity to retrieve the money the cashier had almost put in the drawer and chased after me. I immediately dashed downstairs. You. She was so angry she laughed, chasing closely behind. Where did you get the money? You lied to me. This isn't real borrowed longevity money. I ran all the way downstairs in one breath, turned around, put my hands on my hips, and roared back, since you say it's not real, then don't pay me back. Xiaolin was stunned for a moment and wanted to say something more, but suddenly let out a scream. There's glass in my shoe. In an instant, she lost her balance, her legs gave way, and she fell weightlessly, tumbling down the spiral staircase from the middle all the way to the first floor. She lay on the ground, covered in blood, her limbs twisted into unnatural positions as if they were broken. Don't panic. I'll call an ambulance right away. As I spoke, I pretended to move closer to her, took the real longevity money from my phone case, and stuffed it back into her hand. I don't want this money anymore. I'm giving it back to you. Keep it for your medical expenses. Pa. I spat at her, rummaged through her bag for the insurance policy, then turned and walked away. Evil begets evil, good begets good. It's not that retribution doesn't come, it's just that the wicked haven't met someone as clever and vengeful as I am. I'll gladly accept these 200,000. It's the best Qingming festival gift.